against all the evil that hell can conjure, all the wickedness that mankind can produce, we will send unto them only you. Rip and tear until it is done.
Nearly 60% of our planet has been consumed by the invaders.
We have the Hell Priest signal locked in. The target is marked, but the signal will not hold for long.
For it is he that they fear, not man, or his armies. They fear the mark of the beast.
Yes, here we are. Doom Eternal, ID Software's newest game in the Doom franchise, released on March 20th, 2020, serving as a sequel to Doom 2016 and also a bit of a reimagining of Doom 2, Hell on Earth. You read the title, so how I feel about this game will be no surprise to you. In this video, I am going to be explaining why I love this game so much, its potential issues, and much more. Quick note that I will also be talking about the DLC called The Ancient Gods, as well as diving into the multiplayer a little bit. So with that out the way, join me as we rip and tear through these demon-infested landscapes one last time. Now let's get into this. Looking back at the previous entries in the series, the story has always been an afterthought, something that wasn't important to the overall game. I don't think there are a lot of people out there who would buy a Doom game for its story or plot-driven narrative, and although it would be nice to give us a decent story, it never bothered me that much throughout the series because it was made abundantly clear that the gameplay always served a much greater focus when it came to making a Doom game. I mean, you shouldn't expect something if there isn't an expectation for it. So with this in mind, I'm happy to say that Doom Eternal starts to break the mold for having narrative-driven storytelling and shifts a bit away from focusing on just gameplay and fleshes things out in the story. Well, kinda. But before I get to what I mean by that, here is the synopsis. The game takes place months after the events of Doom 2016, where we see Earth and life on it getting ravaged and taken over by the demons. Overseeing Earth is none other than the Doomslayer, within a sick fortress to boot. On a mission to stop the demon invasion by killing 3 Hell Priests, he teleports onto the Earth and starts his journey to save humanity. And again, a plot similar to Doom 2, like how Doom 2016 was a similar plot to the original Doom. But it does go a bit deeper than just killing those 3 Hell Priests, as I mentioned, as there is also their leader, the Con Maker, who is actively trying to resurrect the Icon of Sin, who was the final fight in Doom 2. Overall, another pretty straightforward plot, but this game not just provides us with context for current events, but also explains a bunch about the past, which I will talk about later. As for the characters, well, like the last game, there are very few characters that actually are prominent in this one. Vega returns, and like in the last game, mainly serves as a guide for the Doomslayer, but he does get a bit more involved throughout the game, especially near the end. Samuel Hayden also returns, but I am honestly rather disappointed with what they did to him. If you remember in the last game, he seems to have been set up to be a potential villain, or at the very least play a bigger part in the next game. But in this one, once Doomslayer gets him and takes him back to the fortress, he just ends up becoming a Vega clone spewing out needless exposition dumps for the rest of the journey. He does technically play a bigger role as he was needed to help the Doomslayer find the final priest. I still think they should have done more with him though. He's kinda just there for the rest of the game onward. Now our main antagonist, the Con Maker, is actually a decent villain. I mean, she has an okay presence throughout the game, appearing as a hologram to taunt the Slayer and to make her presence actually known, but for some reason she also tells the Slayer her plans and where the last Hell Priest is, like, are you stupid? Or something? I don't understand why villains like to compromise themselves in a lot of media. Whatever. Anyway, she's an alright villain. Probably the best one in the series so far. Now, there are other characters, but they really only get like a few minutes of screen time at most. The overall main plot is probably the best one in the series. But knowing that we are playing a Doom game, does Doom Eternal care enough to present this story to the player? Well, he isn't. So this is the second Doom game to actually feature fully fledged cutscenes, with the first one being Doom 3. I guess you can argue that Doom 2016 also had this, but they were mainly more just gameplay events than actual cutscenes. Anyway, there are actually quite a bit of cutscenes throughout the game, and honestly I think for the most part they are fine. They serve to give more context, so if you don't really like them, you can just skip them. So I don't really understand why people consider them a problem. However, I do have a few issues with them. For one, I really think if you haven't caught up on Doom lore prior to this, yes, the games do have a lot of lore, which is literally the last thing you'd expect from this series, then you aren't going to understand most of what is happening here. You only understand things on a surface level like, oh, get this, then bring it to this dude, or something like that. Since you are probably going into this without any knowledge of previous events, the cutscenes are just going to feel worthless and you'll end up being rather confused. But I will admit, there are some rather interesting cutscenes even without the proper context needed. Like for example, there are actually a few flashback cutscenes that go a bit into detail on how the Doomslayer came to be, and not only does it infer that the Doomslayer is actually the Doom guy from the classic games, but he does something really cool in these scenes. Just watch.
We found him in the valley, just outside the castle walls. He was badly wounded and wearing this.
Guts. Huge guts. Kill them. Must kill them all.
He has fight in him yet.
In spite of his injuries.
Send him to the arena. Let him be judged like the others.
Yeah, you heard that right. The Doomslayer, who we now know as Doom Guy, actually speaks. The protagonist, who remains silent throughout the entire series, besides the occasional grunts in the classic games, actually says words. It's really cool and caught me off guard the first time. It's stuff like this that makes me wish that the cutscenes give you just a bit more context, which it easily could have done if they put some of the stuff from the codexes as actual cutscenes. Yeah, the codexes made a return in this game, but they actually hold a lot, and I mean a lot of story relevance this time. They detail things like the events between Doom 64 and Doom 2016, and how the Doomslayer became this indestructible force of nature, to things that answer questions about the Maker Society, and much, much more. It is honestly a pretty interesting read, but most players don't really care to read this stuff. Most of us just wants to kill demons, which makes sense because the series has been advocating this mindset since the very beginning. Which leads me to my second issue. This game seems to send mixed signals on whether it wants to properly tell a narrative or not. Like I said, I don't have a problem with the cutscenes themselves, however, I do have a problem with how they present these cutscenes to the player. Since on one hand, there is an abundance of these cutscenes that dictate more of what is happening in the plot in the past, trying to get you to care. But they just locked the rest of it behind reading a bunch of walls of text, which I understand why they did that, because they didn't want to give us 10-minute long cutscenes like most AAA games do nowadays. But at the same time, if you aren't going to go all the way with these cutscenes, especially if they provide interesting lore, then why bother? Not only that, the Slayer pretty much carries the same attitude as he did in the last game. You know, not giving a care in the world to what is happening. He has no time for games or drawn out dialogue. Like, he is one of the protagonists who actually seems to understand the concept of not letting the enemy talk for so long when they are easily killable.
The beast, does he not seek enhanced power? Gifts to aid him in his noble conquest, perhaps in return for my...
Also, can we just talk about how the humans react to the Doomslayer's presence? It's pretty funny to watch as everyone stares at you in awe, and the Doomslayer just not really caring all too much. But anyway, because of the cutscenes actually driving a narrative this time, it feels a bit more disconnected to how the rest of the game is handling the story stuff, making me wonder what exactly was the final goal of this game's presentation. But honestly, despite these small gripes I have, I still think the story serves its purpose, and is definitely the best we have seen from the franchise thus far. Alright, out with the story and in with that sweet, sweet gameplay. Now, Doom Eternal serves to be the sequel to Doom 2016, meaning that a lot of the mechanics and overall gameplay loop of Doom 2016 serves as the foundation on what would be done here. I would say that in terms of style and gunplay, it mainly feels the same as it usually was, but has some major differences. So let's jump right into that first. As expected, most weapons have made a return here. The only weapon that hasn't made a return is the Gauss Cannon, which has been replaced with a new weapon called the Ballista. Well, if you can even call it a new weapon, because it literally is just a reskinned Gauss Cannon with new weapon mods, which also make a return in this game, with some weapons keeping the same mods and others being given new ones to use. Although the base weapons have gotten significant upgrades, as I feel like a lot of them deal tons of more damage than they did in Doom 2016. Like, I'll admit that I rarely use stuff like the plasma rifle or the heavy assault rifle in Doom 2016 except for their mods, and that was due to not only their base damage being a bit too weak, but also their other counterparts like the Gauss Cannon and the chain gun completely overshadowing them. But in this game, every single weapon seems to actually feel effective when just shooting them normally, which is a great change. Some of these mods and changes to these weapons just make things all the more fun, and give you more advantages depending on how you use them. Like the chain gun's new shield barrier mod makes your projectiles look pathetic, and although this isn't really a mod, the super shotgun has been equipped with this amazing new meat hook that allows you to easily close the gap between you and an enemy, allowing for a devastating good shot. And upgrading it and getting its master upgrade allows for you to set demons aflame while hooked onto them, making it absolutely busted, which I will talk about later. One other crucial change that was made is the decreased ammo capacity that all guns got affected by. Overall, every gun has significantly less ammo than their Doom 2016 counterparts. Like the Super Shotgun went from 60 shots to a puny 16 shots, meaning you can only shoot the thing like 8 times, which does suck, but I'm gonna be honest here, I don't have much of a problem with the lower ammo capacity. Why? Because it actually gets you to use more of your weapons in your arsenal in order to maximize your demon killing potential. I mean, yeah, you can still use and abuse the Super Shotgun and Ballista all you want, but it doesn't remain effective for long as you run out of ammo rather quickly, forcing you to use other guns and weapon mods if you really want to rip and tear through those demons. There are overall less pickups around the levels this time, meaning resource management is a bit more of a necessity in this game compared to some previous entries, but yeah, I don't really mind the lack of ammo because it allows you to think more strategically in how you want to handle a certain combat scenario, which is what the developers seem to be going for with this change. I do think it adds a lot more to the overall combat experience, but what else adds to the combat experience? Well, we have equipment which makes a return here, which serves a much greater purpose than before. You have the grenade, which is the only returning equipment from Doom 2016. Not only is it now mounted onto your shoulder, allowing you to shoot and use at the same time, but it is also much more effective than it was previously, as is everything else in this game. You also have the flame belch, which burns any enemies that are in range. This doesn't do any significant damage, but it actually makes demons spit out armor when they are damaged and killed. This can actually be pretty useful for keeping your health in check, and is best used on large groups of enemies as you get more mileage out of it. This is why the Super Shotgun's mastery upgrade is so busted, as any demon attached to the meat hook is set on fire, making it a useful way to get free armor. Next up, we have the Ice Bomb, which is probably my favorite of the bunch. It basically just freezes enemies, which allows for an easier kill. But when this is fully upgraded, not only does it drop health on each kill, but you also do significantly more damage to them while they are still frozen, allowing for more killing opportunities. All in all, the equipment is a lot more fun to use in this game, and it's just another major component to the combat, as you have to think about when to use them to increase their overall effectiveness. I found myself using the equipment quite often during the game, especially the Ice Bomb. Making good use of each one will ensure you successfully get through all types of situations, and are overall a great addition to the arsenal. However, we also have the Chainsaw, which works functionally the same as it did in Doom 2016. Slashing those demons with it will have a ton of ammo speed, allowing for a quick replenish in resources. However, they did make a few changes, one of them being the amount of fuel you have throughout the entire game. You only have 3 bars of fuel throughout the game now, but your first fuel always recharges once it is used, basically allowing you to always replenish resources whenever possible. I am fine with this change, but I see it as a bit of a downgrade. This is because due to the lack of fuel, a majority of the enemies can no longer be chainsawed, especially the bigger types. This means that you no longer really have the choice of waiting for a stronger enemy to use it on, and now it just comes down to using it on the weaker demon types. It is a bit of a bummer, however there is a good reason for why they made this decision. This is due to the next mechanic I'm going to be talking about, which is the almighty Crucible Blade. This thing essentially allows for a free instant kill on an enemy, slicing them in half. You only get 3 charges, but you can get more charges by finding them around the map. Now aesthetically this thing is really cool, and is such a neat addition to the Slayer's growing arsenal. I think it serves well during actual gameplay too, and it is extremely satisfying just ending the existence of a demon in just one swing. Too bad it is a bit short-lived though, since you can only acquire it near the end of the game right before the final batch of levels, and the charges you find throughout the rest of the game are a very few amount, meaning you probably are only using this thing every once in a while. I do understand why they did this, since they didn't want it to make it so strong, but at the same time I wish they had added just a little bit more of these to to actually make it an impactful addition to the gameplay loop. One last mechanic I'd like to mention is the brand new Blood Punch melee attack. When you have a Blood Punch ready, you can unleash a quick but effective punch on an enemy which does massive damage to them. You charge the Blood Punch by performing glory kills, which also makes a return here and is as cool as it was in Doom 2016. The Blood Punch definitely isn't much at first, but once you get the upgrades for it, I find it pretty useful. Now this game's combat is not only well thought out, but it is also very fast, and staying still is an absolute death sentence, as the demons will not be afraid to drain your health quickly if you aren't making good use of your movement and gunplay to actively push back against this hellish force. Good thing there is a great maneuver tactic to help out on your mobility and avoid hazardous projectiles being sent on your way. I am of course talking about the dash ability, allowing you to quickly dodge attacks and move around the area. You can dash pretty much anywhere you want except for up or down. Hell, you can even dash in the air, getting you some extra air time and making you a harder target. The dash is an essential component to the combat experience due to the aggressive nature of the demons in this game. It really complements how fast-paced the combat feels and adds yet another extra layer to the fights throughout your journey. So with all the weapons, mechanics, and movement options in mind, they provide the player with what is the most expansive set of weapons and tools to use. It feels great, and it's the perfect balance between the innovations and familiarity. But honestly, I would say the biggest difference between this game and 2016 is the pacing of the combat. Doom Eternal cranks up the combat in terms of scale and aggressiveness to over 11, and it is so damn good. You'll find yourself constantly moving and dashing through the area, dodging incoming attacks and projectiles, while also switching between your weapons constantly to tear those demons to shreds. So basically just imagine Doom 2016's combat loop, but way faster and with the added mechanics and changes. The pace of the combat wouldn't be accomplished though without the enemies. So most of the enemies from 2016 have returned in this game, with also a fresh batch of new enemies to boot. Some of the older enemies that were in 2016 also return here, like the Pain Elementals, who aren't that bad in this game than they were in Doom 2, as well as the... oh no... yeah, the Archvile is in this game, but he functions differently than he did in Doom 2. His main ability consists of staying far back and summoning buff demons, forcing you to prioritize him before he yet again ruins your day. Yeah, the Archvile is almost as annoying as he was in Doom 2. Almost. Arachnotrons also make a return, but they aren't nearly as bad as they were previously. In fact, they're one of the first enemies you see in the game. As for new enemies, you have types like the Dread Knight, the Maker Drones, the Whiplashes, etc. Now every enemy in this game has something to add to the overall combat and the decision making you will be doing throughout the game. Returning enemies have all been giving you attacks and movement options to counter your new tools and weapons. Like Cacodemons now shoot multiple times at once and also lunge at you if you aren't paying attention. Barons of Hell now sport blades and are overall much more aggressive and deadly if we don't know how to properly deal with them. There are many more enemy types that have now become pretty aggressive, so you have to think quickly and perform the actions you need to take while juggling other enemies on the battlefield. The best way I can describe it is kind of like a rhythm game, but except with no rhythm and a lot more blood and guts involved. To help you get more an advantage against these enemies, some of them now have weak points that when hit, significantly damage an enemy and prevent them from properly attacking you, like destroying an Arachnotron's turret, or shooting a grenade into a Cacodemon's mouth, instantly stunning it. I really like the idea of the weak points as it gives you something to look out for and remember when you're fighting all types of enemies in the game. Another cool thing about the demons is how dealing damage to them will actually cause them to look damaged. Like the Baron of Hell will lose pieces of his skin the more you damage him, as well as the other enemies breaking apart. It's a neat detail and gives you an idea of how much damage you have done to the enemy. Overall, the enemies are as aggressive as ever, and their brand new features really sell you that fast-paced and over-the-top style of gameplay that the game offers. But wait, I am forgetting someone, aren't I? Casual players and critics' #1 favorite enemy of all time. The zombie, of course. Just kidding, it's the Marauder. The Marauder is one of the new enemy types in the game. Now, this is one of the biggest debates when it comes to talking about this game. There's a lot of people who hate him, but also a lot of people who think he's fine. Me? I'm sort of mixed when it comes to him. Basically, to defeat him, you have to patiently dodge him and wait until he starts to swing at you with a green light flashing. After this, you will have a second to shoot him, which stuns him, giving you a brief opening. You repeat this until he is dead. Now, fighting him on his own is not the issue that people seem to have with him. He's actually a fun mini-boss encounter at first, testing your patience and timing in order to defeat him. But it is when he becomes a normal enemy with other demons on the field is when people start to have an issue with him. I honestly see the argument of both sides when it comes to this guy. Starting off with the bad, it can be pretty frustrating to deal with him on the first playthrough. Every time he's on the field, things just start to get a bit overwhelming to deal with, leading to a lot of frustrating moments. Not only that, he takes a while to actually kill, especially if you aren't taking advantage of quick switching weapons, making him a crappy roadblock to deal with since he is usually the last one you're going to kill after everything else is dead. His attacks can be a bit too much too, and punishes you a bit too hard just for not shooting him at the right time, which will summon his wolf companion to make your life even worse. However, these are all mainly issues only on the first playthrough. I feel like after you get used to his attacks and overall become a better player, he is really not that difficult. At the very least, he is just a bit tedious to fight. But I also think he is quite important to the game's combat design. You see, every demon kinda has a certain way to kill them effectively, and exploiting their weak points is the key to mastering Doom Eternal's combat. So the Marauder teaches the player how essential it is to find those weaknesses in order to conquer the later more challenging fights in the game. So overall, even though the Marauder is annoying to fight at times, I don't personally mind him being in the game, but I definitely see where people are coming from when they say they don't like him. So all of the previous levels so far has always been somewhat linear when progressing through them. After finishing one level, you'd move on to the next one immediately. Well, Doom Eternal actually switches this up with the brand new Fortress of Doom, which essentially acts like a mini hub area you go back to in between a few levels during the game. At the Fortress of Doom, you can do quite a bit of things, like listen to iconic songs from the past games, grab new equipment and weapons, unlock new upgrades using Sentinel batteries, and practice your combat skills in the Ripatorium. I really like the Fortress of Doom as it serves as a nice change of pace in between levels, and it's a space where you can get prepared for your next mission and just chill out for a bit. There's also a lot of cool and funny Easter eggs to be found here, especially in the Doomslayer's room. Seeing all these iconic book titles with a Doom-like twist to them will always put a smile on my face. Hell, look, he even played the original Doom and Doom 2 on this small computer in the corner of the room, which is neat. So yeah, the Fortress of Doom is pretty cool, and I am glad they incorporated it into the level structure. But what is level structure without the levels themselves? Now, compared to levels we have seen in the previous games, they definitely seem to go for a more linear type of experience this time around. They aren't that intricate, but that isn't to say they are bad. There is still plenty to do in these levels, like there is still a decent amount of open areas where combat sections take place. There are also tons of platforming sections in this game that utilize your upgraded mobility like the dash to get over large gaps. This is another polarizing part of the game for some people, but I think they are great. They add a lot more to level design and help flesh it out a bit more. They are also fun to traverse too, since the control is much better in this game compared to Doom 2016 with its very little platforming sections. Besides, I think there has to be something to put in between the combat areas, and I think this is a good choice for placement. There are also some unique little parts of levels, such as Erdak's large rings that has you flying across the area, to a special occasion where you take control of a Revenant in order to get Doom Guy's super shotgun. I wish there were more moments like this, as this is the only time this happens. Let's not forget that the secrets also return in this game, with some new things to collect to boot. But to be honest, they unfortunately feel a bit watered down here due to the more linear design. I mean, I usually find almost all the secrets in one run, even my first playthrough. They aren't even hidden compared to previous games where it was actually pretty difficult to find them and they felt like actual secrets as well. I also feel like the map has a part in this, as having it fully upgraded quite literally tells you where everything is, making it painfully easy. Despite this, the secrets still serve their purpose, and they just feel a bit underutilized this time around. Secrets consist of gameplay upgrades like weapon mods, which I have already talked about, Praetor Suit points, which make a return from last game, but feel a bit more significant as these will allow you to get upgrades for your grenades, ice bombs, the map, etc. Runes, which also make a return from last game, but this time there is no minigame challenge to complete here, as you just simply pick a rune ability this time. These are also pretty useful and will help you out a lot in choosing your playstyle and combat effectiveness. You also have these crystals, which are essentially the Argent cells from the last game, giving you 3 options on whether to increase your health, armor, or ammo capacity. Although this time, combining certain upgrades can give you a bonus upgrade, adding a bit more prioritization to it. You also have these Sentinel batteries, which I also mentioned earlier, to unlock upgrades in the Fortress of Doom, as well as extra lives. Yeah, you heard me. Well, they don't act like traditional extra lives, but what they do is pretty much give you an extra chance once your health reaches zero. And honestly, I am really not a fan of these things. They just make the game a lot easier since they pretty much guarantee no consequences for dying. The reason I'm against it is because the game really drives the notion of you learning from mistakes and in turn helping you master the combat of the game. But with these extra lives in place, it doesn't really feel like you learn anything from messing up or dying. It's the only mechanic in the game that actively goes against what the game is setting you up for. Now, I understand why they are there, since the game can get pretty damn challenging and you'll probably end up losing a majority of them on your first playthrough, but those things are literally everywhere. Like, just look at how many lives I have near the end of the game. It's absurd. If these were toned down tremendously, then I wouldn't have minded them that much, but because they are so common, it makes me wonder why they even bothered with it in the first place. Anyway, next we have the secret encounters, which are smaller timed combat scenarios that reward you with a weapon mod point if you complete one. And finally, for the gameplay oriented secrets, we have the Slayer keys, which allow you to open a nearby gate in the level to do a tough combat sequence. There are only 6 of these throughout the game, and the encounters get more difficult as you do them. But what do you get when you do them all? Well, once you complete an encounter, you get an Empyrean key to pick up, which you can use back at the Fortress of Doom to unlock this sequence and obtain the Unmaker. Yeah, that weapon exclusive to Doom 64. It actually makes a return in this game. And it's garbage. For real this time. The Unmaker shares the same ammo that the BFG does, and although the weapon is fine on its own, it nowhere near compares to the BFG, meaning they have no real reason to use it since it just isn't as effective. I feel like an easy fix for this is to just give the Unmaker its own separate ammo type from the BFG, or just share the same ammo type for the energy weapons like it originally was. But case in point, the Unmaker is just a disappointment, and that's really all there is to it. As for non-gameplay oriented secrets, we have the toys, but instead of them just being different variations of Doom Guy, they are based off of all the enemy types and other characters. These are all pretty neat and stuff. You also have the music albums, which you get to listen to at the Fortress of Doom, allowing you to sit back and enjoy those metal rocking tracks. I do wish you can enable them during gameplay, which would have been even better. There's also codexes, which I have already talked about, and finally the cheat codes, which allow you to do things like have infinite ammo, stay in a certain power-up mode, etc. Oh crap, wait, that actually reminds me. The power-ups still exist in this game, but I forgot to mention them because they feel like an afterthought in this game. They only appear on rare occasions and overall just don't feel as useful to use. I am not terribly bothered by it though, as I seem to not want to give the player too many advantages during the combat segments. So despite the heavy amount of secrets that there are in the game, I still think they could have been executed a little better, but I'll blame more of the linear level design for this. So, remember how I remarked in my last review how many times the series has done the USA facility and hell set pieces for pretty much every game? Well, I am very pleased to say that Doom Eternal not only finally breaks this pattern, but offers so much more variety than I expected in terms of set pieces. Every set piece in this game is amazing, ranging from the collapsed cities of Earth as hell seeps into it, to a forgotten city lost to ancient times. This game has a lot to offer, and it all looks so good. I think my favorite set piece has definitely got to be the Mars core level. You spend the first 1/3 of the level racing toward the BFG 10,000 as it is constantly firing left and right, blinding the area with a green beam of light as alarms go off, signifying that the BFG has fired. It is such a thrilling set piece. Then once the Slayer gets to the BFG 10,000, he literally blows a hole into Mars. It is so damn cool, man. Then during the rest of the level, you slowly make your way toward the center, jumping through the pieces of the facility that have broken apart and ripping and tearing through the demons. And come on, you can't tell me this doesn't look cool. All of these areas just look so well made, and it always awes me how beautiful certain areas feel. I found myself stopping and admiring the landscapes on my first playthrough, and I still take quick glances on it during repeat playthroughs. All in all, the set pieces are a massive, massive step up from the rest of the series, and I think they did an amazing job with them. Now for the bosses. Now this game this time around actually evenly spreads out the boss encounters, unlike Doom 2016, which shoved them near the end of the game. So our first boss is the Doom Hunter, which is the first solid boss in the game. All you have to do is get rid of the shield aura around him with the plasma rifle. Once this is done, you can attack him and destroy the little floating thing he is hovering on. After that, you're able to kill him with ease by continuously shooting him. After this, though, you may think the fight is over, but there is actually a phase 2 where you fight 2 of them. Overall, a great introductory boss fight, and a weaker version of them becomes a regular enemy later on. Next we have the Gladiator, who's basically a bigger and beefier marauder. Just wait for him to attack with the green flashing light, and then shoot him, which should allow you to melee him. Keyword should, as sometimes it just doesn't happen for some reason. I don't know. Oh, but surprise surprise, he also has a phase 2, where he loses his shield but goes berserk. Just make sure to carefully dodge his attacks as he can get pretty hectic at this stage. Overall, another pretty solid and fun fight. Next up, we have the Con Maker, who is probably my least favorite fight in the game. You pretty much just shoot her until her shield goes down, then you use the Super Shotgun's meat hook to go up and blood punch her. Do this about 5 times and you win. This fight is fine, but this is ridiculously easy as her attacks only really amount to arena obstacles. And finally, we have the Icon of Sin himself, who has seen a significant upgrade since we last saw him in Doom 2. He is at first coated with armor, which you have to target each separate piece of the armor on his body to drain his health. Once you get rid of the armor, you teleport to a new location where you now have to destroy each part of his body like you do with the armor. After that, the fight is over, and the Doomslayer delivers the final blow and down goes the beast. Am I the only one that really likes this fight? I mean, people complain how his attacks aren't telegraphable or something when they are? I don't really understand the issue here. This fight is pretty sick and is leagues better than the fight that was in Doom 2 for, well, very obvious reasons. All in all, the boss fights in the game are all fairly solid, but I can't really say they're anything special. Still, ID Software yet again did a good job with this compared to the other entries in the series. Now on to Peak. The soundtrack. Mick Gordon has returned to do the OST for this game, and you already know what I'm about to say about it. Yup. It is fantastic. Mick Gordon has really stepped it up with this one too. Like, there are so many bangers that I have literally no idea which ones to show off for the video. I guess I will start off with the most iconic track in this OST, and this song is The Only Thing They Fear Is You. Ooh, definitely one of my favorite tracks in the OST. Next up, we have the BFG 10,000. This song is very fast-paced and fits perfectly with the chaotic set piece that accompanies it. One thing to note before I play is that this was actually originally going to have an even higher BPM than it already does. So after listening to this, just imagine the fact that this song would have been even faster. Now this next one I'm going to show is a much slower piece, but I really like it as it gives off this eerie and mysterious vibe and fits the Sentinel Prime area perfectly. Hey, the menu theme is also pretty good too. I love how it starts off with a slow, faint whistle, the same whistle that he plays during the Doom 2 Icon of Sin fight. Then it switches into a heavy rocking tune and gives the player a taste of what they are getting themselves into. It's awesome. Overall, the soundtrack is absolutely phenomenal, and like Doom 2016, it really heightens the overall gameplay experience and really hypes the player up with its high energy and aggressive tone. Mick Gordon has done it again. Excellent work as always. Before we continue with the single player stuff, let's take a bit of a break from that and talk about the multiplayer for a little bit. So with the unfortunate failure of Doom 2016's multiplayer, ID Software wanted to make something better than what they did in the last game. So they came up with a good idea for a mode they believed would do well, introducing Battle Mode, which is essentially the multiplayer of the game. The game consists of 2 demons going up against 1 player Slayer. Whichever team wins 3 rounds wins the match. Now on paper, this is actually a pretty cool concept and sounds kind of fun, but to make this mode, ID Software had to sacrifice not only the original multiplayer from Doom 2016, but also the Snap Map feature, which really disappoints me because Snap Map really could have been expanded upon even more in this game. But instead, they resorted to making Battle Mode. So, does this new mode make the sacrifice of Snap Map worth it? No. No, it doesn't. So let's start off with the demons. So the player on the demon side have a variety of choices on the demons they want to choose, all depending on a certain type of playstyle. For example, Archviles are more of a support type demon who can summon shields to protect them and their demon partner. Marauders and Dread Knights are very offensive type of demons and encourage you to be aggressive, and so on and so forth. Both players have to work together and kill the Slayer, which can be done by smart usage of their abilities, placement of normal AI-controlled demons that can be placed down, or the usage of healing areas. Honestly, the demon side is actually well thought out, as it really encourages you and your teammates to communicate and figure out how to kill the Slayer. Each demon has something to offer in terms of main abilities too, giving you quite a bit of replayability and control over how you want to play. Now, it would be a real damn shame if the Slayer was very overpowered and makes any sort of strategizing and teamwork of the demon side can feel completely irrelevant. Yeah, you already see where I'm going with this. The Slayer pretty much has everything he has in the campaign aside from some weapon mods and the Ice Bomb, and when you have guns like the Super Shotgun and Ballista, let's just say the demon side have no chance of survival. Yep, I am being serious. If the Slayer on the other team is at least a decent player, then expect to lose because no matter how good you could be, the Slayer will always reign up on top. The only time you are going to win is if the person playing the Slayer is really bad. There's no balance to anything in this mode, and it just feels unfair sometimes. I mean, sure, the demons can get an upgrade of their choice at the start of each round, but guess what? So does the Slayer, so that means literally nothing. Overall, the multiplayer could have actually been fun, but the sheer imbalanceness of the mode combined with the fact that we could have had the return of Snap Map instead just leaves a bad impression overall. Okay, now that that is over with, let's get back to the single player stuff. So as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, there is DLC for this game, a bit of an expansion that came out shortly after the release of the base game. So, let's jump into The Ancient Gods Part 1.
Whenever you're ready. We cannot regain control of Urdak without the Seraphim's help. You broke the seal when you awakened the icon of sin in their world. The balance between their 2 dimensions has been broken with the demons now in control of Urdak.
Portal ready in 3, 2...
Just to clarify that the DLC portion of this video will be a lot less in depth and I won't be talking about everything because, well, look at the video length. So I'm sorry if I don't mention something you'd have liked me to mention. Anyway, onto the plot synopsis. Following the events of the campaign, the Conmaker's death and the Hell's Conquest on Urdak have made those wretched demons come back to Earth for round 2. So Doomslayer, with the help of the Arc Scientists, set out on a journey to stop these demons yet again, starting with finding the Seraphim. Now, what does the DLC add or change from the base game? Well, for starters, this expansion is only 3 levels, however they are all basically the length of 2 normal levels of the base campaign. And throughout these 3 levels, the Doomslayer will face some new enemies and also a few new upgrades. Now, the levels themselves are fine levels as is, but they are still rather linear, especially since there is a severe lack of actual secrets in these levels besides from the Codex entries and the Slayer Gates, which now only provide you with a support rune, basically a 4th rune slot. Although I will admit that the set piece for the first level is awesome. Going through an Atlantic complex in heavy rain, and during the second half of the level the complex falls apart with fire and smoke everywhere, I really enjoyed this level overall, and it's definitely the best one in the DLC. Now, in terms of new enemies, I am honestly not really a fan of them. You have the turrets, which are these eyeball creatures that are stationary and will hide if you look in their direction for a few seconds. You know, I wouldn't have minded these guys so much if they didn't hide from you, because having to prioritize them and not being able to quickly kill them because they stay out of sight gets on my nerves. You also have the spirit, which takes control of other demons and severely buffs them. And I mean severely buffs them. Like, they are insanely annoying to deal with because the enemy deals more damage and is also much faster, making it very tedious to finally get rid of them. Once they are out, you can use the plasma rifle's microwave beam mod to get rid of them for good before they possess another enemy. Overall, probably my least favorite enemy in the entire game, bar none. And lastly, we have the Bloodmaker drone, which pretty much acts like a normal drone, but is a bit more aggressive and forces you to wait until they unshield themselves to pop a bullet in their skull. Overall, the enemies kinda blow, mainly due to the spirit enemy, who makes a lot of these fights in the game way more difficult than they needed to be. Now, one major change is how the live system was implemented, as this time there is nowhere near the amount of lives placed around areas in this DLC compared to the base game. This is a much welcome change in my opinion, as now the lives you find in here actually feel worth something, and now you can actually learn from your faults, making things actually pretty challenging. I will definitely say for certain that this DLC is harder than the base game due to this change. It should have been like this in the first place in my opinion. Now, the only boss in this DLC is the Seraphim, and I really do not like this boss. At first he starts off fine, but once his spirits come in, it all just goes downhill. Dealing with these spirits is extremely annoying, especially during the last portion of the fight when the arena is weirdly changed around. Not only are you dealing with the spirit enemies, but you also have a few more enemies trying to kill you, and with the confusing arena design to go along with it, you are in for a frustrating time. Not a good way to end a DLC. Now, this DLC actually has a soundtrack, which is obviously produced by... Wait. Mick Gordon didn't produce his soundtrack? Why? Oh. Huh. So apparently back when the Doom Eternal OST first released, fans had noticed that the sound mixing and quality of the OST was pretty bad. People started to think that it was Mick Gordon's fault for the lackluster product. But what actually happened was that Mick Gordon missed the deadline for the OST release and was properly given an extension so he can complete it. But he ended up missing the deadline too, causing the lead audio designer at ID Software, Chad Mossholder, to complete the tracks instead. Due to this situation, this unfortunately meant that Mick Gordon didn't return to do the soundtrack for The Ancient Gods, and will probably never return to do a soundtrack for the series ever again. And this really, really sucks because Mick Gordon was the one who really breathed life into these amazing soundtracks, and I am not sure if it will ever be the same without him. I wish Gordon good luck on his future endeavors, and I hope he knows that his work on the Doom games will always be recognized by me and millions of others. So without Mick, who was the one who composed the soundtrack for the DLC? Well, it was actually two people who composed it, named Andrew Hulsholt and David Levy. I would say they did a pretty good job. You can tell they tried to somewhat stay in line with the type of music Gordon made for the game while also having their own style, which I am all down for. I'm not going to give an example here, but it is overall fairly solid. This DLC is pretty decent. It's essentially just more Doom Eternal as not a lot was added, but that fast-paced blood-pumping action is still at full force here, and that's what I think matters the most. But if you were listening, I said that this was part 1 of the DLC, meaning that yes, we still have one more DLC to go, which is The Ancient Gods Part 2.
No blood can be spilled in this holy place. Our time will come. If you survive, I will be waiting for you at the city of Imola.
After the Doomslayer defeats the Seraphim and meets the Dark Lord, who just looks like an evil version of him, the Dark Lord leaves, leaving the Doomslayer to continue on his journey to defeat the Dark Lord, which will prevent the demons from reaching this dimension and invading Earth ever again. So what is new in this DLC? Like in part 1, there are mainly 3 levels, but there is an extra one that just serves as the final boss. Everything I have said about part 1's level design remains the same here, with again a severe lack of secrets to find. The set pieces in these levels are again fairly solid, especially the last level where the game just turns into an adventure's endgame type of finale, which I find pretty cool. And there are a lot of new enemies in this one compared to DLC 1, so I won't go through all of them, but I will go through the notable ones. First off, we have the Screecher zombies, which, just buff enemies around you if you accidentally hit them. I'm getting pretty tired of these buff enemies, as all they serve is to make every fight a pain to go through, and not in the fun way either. You have armored barons, which are, well, barons with armor. As long as you time your shot with the green light that appears, they aren't too bad. You also have cursed prowlers, which when they hit you will give you a poison effect which you can cure by blood punching the prowler who did it. I actually like the concept of these, as it forces you to prioritize it and make things a bit more interesting. There are these stone imps, which can also be killed by either a chainsaw or with the normal shotgun full auto mod. I don't really get why this enemy exists, but there is a segment right before the Dark Lord fight that has you slaughter a bunch of them, which is pretty fun. There are a few more types, but I don't think they are worth noting, and overall, besides the Screecher enemies, these ones aren't as bad compared to the last DLC, and they at least mostly add something to the gameplay that actually feels authentic. And hey, we actually have something new to counter these enemies with this time. The Sentinel Hammer, which acts as a replacement for the Sentinel Blade. This thing has Doomslayer slam it down and stun any enemy in its vicinity, allowing for an advantage over them. It can be charged with glory kills, which I honestly find much better than having to pick them up around the map like the Sentinel Blade. Combining this move with a Flame Belcher Ice Bomb will have a huge load of armor or health spear out of any enemy that got stunned, making it extremely useful. To be honest, I think I like the hammer better than the blade, as you can actually use it more often, and I actually just overall find it more useful, especially for keeping you alive. Now we have the final boss, the Dark Lord. He is pretty much a huge marauder with a slew of new attacks to dodge. He has 3 phases which get harder as the fight progresses. The thing with this fight though is that it can severely punish you if he lands a hit on you, as he replenishes health each successful hit. I actually like this as it serves as a test of patience and overall skill. It does make the fight last a bit too long though, especially if you are messing up, but he is overall probably one of the hardest and also one of the best fights in the game. With the Dark Lord defeated, the Doomslayer has one final thing to say to his creator.
Tell me, have you nothing to say to your creator before you strike him down? No.
And with this, the Doomslayer passes out, and is put in a sarcophagus for keeping until he is needed once again in the future, marking the end of the DLC and the series thus far. Doom Eternal is one of my favorite FPS games of all time, with its fast-paced, incredibly intricate gameplay loop to that amazing soundtrack that makes you feel like a force to be reckoned with. This game really feels like a good sequel, as it takes what 2016 did and amplifies it to a large degree, coming out as an extremely well-rounded shooter. Despite the few issues I had with the game, such as the live system and the multiplayer, those flaws feel very insignificant due to just how amazing everything else is. I could honestly care less about those shortcomings in the end, as Doom Eternal is just too good. I can't even put into words how much I love this game, and is definitely my favorite in the series. A solid 10 out of 10. I highly, highly recommend it. And with that, we have finally reached the end of the marathon. Whew. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. So what's the next for this channel? Well, I have a whole timeline of things I want to make for the first half of 2022. So expect my next video later this month. But for now, I'm going to give myself a little break as I feel very exhausted from making these videos in the span of a month and a half. But I did it for you guys. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.